Here we are then with a series about studio effects. Today it's reverb. What's that? Well, it's what happens when a room or another space responds to a sound that is created within it. So if you click your fingers in the middle of a cathedral, you'll hear the echo and the reverberation that comes from it. And that's what these computer plugins do. There are two types of reverbs. You have the synthesized ones, which are most of them, and then you have ones called convolution reverbs, which depend on having an impulse response loaded into them. Now, what's an impulse response? Well, it's basically how a room, a specific room, responds. So it could be Carnegie Hall or the Grand Canyon, for example. And you can download those into your convolution reverb, and lo and behold, you're in those places. Now, I'm going to use Reverb today, which is the plugin on Logic Pro X. This is not DAW specific. So if you've got Cubase or Ableton, essentially, it's the same kind of thing. So it's more about the principle here, and also at the same time to say that I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to give you recommendations. I'm here to show you basically various settings, and then you can decide for yourself what works best. I've got a backing vocal. Well, I've got some backing vocals here as well. I'm just going to mute those for a minute. And just play you the lead vocal on its own. So at the moment, you can see Reverb here, which is set to bypass. So if I play you this, the lead vocal has no reverb at all. Then you go and show me up on the dance floor. Is that all right? Is it a good thing that there's no reverb on it? For me, I'd probably want a little bit, but it does have a sense of immediacy, and it does depend on the rhythm, it does depend on the track. So I'm going to press active now on the reverb and see what happens now with that lead vocal. Then you go and show me up on the dance floor. That's a bit better for my liking. Now, when you first open Reverb, I've had this open before, it defaults to 50% reverb, which for my money is just a little bit over the top. Show me up on the dance. So, a friend of mine once said, whatever reverb you think is acceptable, halve it. So I think I may have started with 25% and then just halved it to 14 or something. Then you go and show me up on the dance floor. I can still hear all the consonants clearly, but one thing that reverb also does for you is it places your vocal on the stereo playing field, really. So it's not just in the middle with everything else sort of panned. Of course, with your vocal, there's only one mouth and one microphone, so it's a mono signal. You've got to turn it into something that sits in a stereo image, and reverb is a good way of doing that. Now, most of the controls on the reverb, we've got decay, which is fairly obvious. It's the amount of it's the length of the reverb time. So if I just ramp it up to 5 seconds. Show me up on the dance floor. Yeah, I mean, it's just a little bit too high for my liking, but some people might say, oh yeah, it sounds quite good for the chorus because it sort of brings it out a bit. Not sure myself. I think I probably had it on about a second. Neck another double shot. That's fine. Now, attack and pre-delay. Pre-delay is a control that you would find on pretty much every reverb, and it states essentially the delay between the impulse that you give the reverb and the reverb actually sounding. Let's whack it up to half a second and you can hear that. Show me up. So show me up. Now, that might be quite a nice thing. You can just play with that at your leisure. You can also usually specify it in terms of a note itself. That's pretty useful. It used to be just milliseconds, and you sort of tweaked it until it was roughly right. And then you're fiddling about with 1 millisecond difference to get a result, you know. So I'll just take it back down to, I think it was about 8 milliseconds, 7 or 8, I think it defaults to. Attack. That's how quickly the reverb comes in. That might be useful. Show me up on the dance floor. What that's done, I'll just solo out my track. Dance floor. So the reverb isn't so loud at the beginning. If I take it to 0%, show me up. the reverb is quite loud with respect to that vocal. I quite like having that attack control there. Show me up! So it can really take the edge off the beginning of that reverb. Size, that's the size of the room. If we take it right down, show me up! It sounds like a small space. If we take it right up, show me up! It sounds like it's just a bigger room, generally. Now, that's slightly different to decay time, because you can have a large room that doesn't really have much reverb at all. Of course, it depends on the surfaces as well. Now, reverb density. This is where you have essentially a control between early reflections, which is like actual echoes, bep, bep, coming back to you, and the sort of washiness of that reverb. So if I have it in 0%, show me up, it sounds quite grainy. I'll just turn it up a little bit on the wet signal. Show me up. So you can hear those sort of delays. As I turn it all the way up, show me up, it's more of a washed out reverb sound. I just leave it in the middle because it sounds a bit more realistic. But realistic, is it realistic to have all that reverb on a lead vocal? Well, probably not. But it's what rock and pop is. It's what music is. Music is about developing all of these things in order to evolve, really. So I'm just going to take that reverb level back down, put it back into context. Don't spend too much time on solo mode, because you might find that it's a little bit incongruous, and when you put it back in, it doesn't sound any good at all. Show me up. Now, I've also got some backing vocals, which I've muted here. I'm just going to unmute those. On the dance floor, neck another double shot. Backing vocals just give that lead vocal a little bit more power. There is a reverb on those, and it's called a bus. If I just select the next vocal down, we've got a bus here, which is actually sending part of the signal to a single reverb unit. That's how we used to work with our mixing desks and reverbs. We'd have one reverb unit in the corner that used to deal with everything, and then you'd feed part of each channel to that. You might have had 2 or 3 reverbs perhaps, but on this you've got stacks of reverbs. You can download 1001 plugins that are reverb plugins that all sound slightly different. So the world is really brave. So we've got these 3 backing vocals, which I've panned slightly to help with the stereoness of them. I'll just play you those on their own, just so that you can hear what they sound like. Show me up. So the reverb is a little less present there. I've used, when you actually select the bus here, on Logic, it shows you what you've got. You've got a space designer this time. Nice small plate. It's fairly unassuming. A plate reverb is where you have a piece of metal, transducer in the middle, and a microphone at each end, and they're basically all attached to this massive, great metal plate. That's what a plate is. I fixed one once when I was working in London back in the 90s. Of course, they're sort of things of the past, really. They still exist, but that's essentially what it's simulating. Now, just listening to the drums, I put a bit of reverb on the snare. Show me up on the dance floor, neck another double shot, don't want this anymore. Now, when you do add reverb to things, it can make them seem louder. So you've got to be a little bit careful. I mean, that snare reverb was way over the top. I've sort of brought it down and then halved it again. You can put reverb on anything. I've got a guitar solo over here that I did, which has got some reverb. I could smother that in reverb and other things to make it even more present in the mix, but the problem with guitar solos is that they can take over. So I've purposefully brought mine down with a bit of reverb, so it's just an extra sound rather than something too loud. So there it is. There's a bit about reverb. I mean, I could go on and on and on, like different reverbs, different this, different that, but the choice is yours. It's a fantastic tool that should be used, well, creatively, but with some caution as well.